Tucam and Swai started their day with gentle simplicity under the welcoming light of dawn. The air was fresh, and the small village stirred awake with its usual quiet rhythm. Tucam, a determined woman with the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, greeted the morning with hopeful eyes. Her heart carried the care of a young child, a baby who needed protection and sustenance. Each day for Tucam was a challenge to balance the demands of survival with the warmth of her newborn smiles. The village around her buzzed faintly with the whispers of routine, but none quite like Tucam's own evolving story. She thought about the tasks ahead. Work possibilities were scarce but necessary. A nearby wood peeling workshop promised a chance, maybe a lifeline. The thought of peeling wood and drying boards entered her mind like a steady rhythm, a task that could bring her some income. Yet the care of a baby complicated matters. How could she manage both? The surrounding community, with its quiet threads of connection, made her reach out to an ally in the office, a comrade named Hugh. He was a trusted figure within this network, a man who could provide assistance or at least advice. The conversation with Comrade Hugh was filled with the practicalities of life and work. Hugh's words carried reassurance. He was stable with his job there, helping others, and rooted in his own duties. Tucam's inquiry about the market and her recent lack of movement there revealed the strain of her situation. She had been frequently seen before, yet recently her presence had dimmed, a sign perhaps of the growing pressure she faced. Hugh pledged to help with errands, to procure the goods Tucam needed for her small shack where she cared for her child and managed her work. If the labor in the village became too heavy, he would step in, preventing her from reaching a breaking point. Days passed with these quiet exchanges. The community watched quietly but with a mix of concern and indifference. Tucam found branches and wooden cores, heavy and cumbersome, to close the open doors of her makeshift shelter. The shed was her sanctuary and her workspace. Vulnerable to the elements and the eyes of others, securing it was a small victory against the uncertainties that surrounded her life. The act of closing the doors was a gesture of protection, of claiming a space for her fragile existence and the work she strived to accomplish. As Tucam carried on with her daily chores, drying the wooden boards under the watchful sun, the small child played nearby, a fragile beacon of joy amidst the hard labor. The unfinished boards dried in neat rows, 20 rows marked as a day's accomplishments, the work rewarded with small payments from the villagers who owned the wood. Nearby, the landowner's house stood, a symbol of authority and oversight. Tucam found permission to take some wooden cores to secure her shelter. The community's subtle approvals and rejections wove through the narrative. Some welcomed her temporary stay, while others whispered doubts and suspicions. The arrival of a neighbor to assist with closing the doors marked a rare kindness, hands joining efforts with care and respect. A heavy load was shared, a small gesture that spoke volumes about solidarity and hardship. This neighbor knew how to craft and mend, lending skill to complement Tucam's perseverance. Together, they secured the shed, a barrier against the night and the misunderstanding that loomed beyond. Shadows of suspicion crept in from the periphery. Whispers floated about the presence of a woman in the shed, the hurried closing of the doors, the hushed tones that hinted at scandal. Rumors stirred, fueled by fear and misunderstanding. The village's quiet scrutiny weighed heavy on Tucam's spirit as misunderstanding threatened to unravel the fragile fabric of her life. Her presence was questioned, her intentions doubted. Yet beneath the rumors, the truth was a simple story of a woman trying to survive, to provide, to care for a child in an unforgiving world. The tension mounted. Someone confronted the scenario with harsh words, accusing Tucam of inappropriate relations, of taking advantage of kindness. These confrontations reflected the harsh judgments often cast on those who tread the fine line of survival in close-knit communities. But Tucam remained steadfast, her explanations gentle and sincere. She denied the accusations, revealing her reality, a life punctuated by struggle and the ever-present need to protect her child. Her spirit bore the marks of hardship, but also a resolute kindness that sought no harm to others. The story unfolded not with the sharp edges of conflict, but with the weariness of those caught in life's unrelenting push. Tieu Nu's world was one of quiet endurance, marked by the daily balancing of fear and hope. Behind the scenes, Comrade Hugh and others who knew the full story found themselves navigating the delicate task of defending her against the rising tide of suspicion. They recognized the difference between rumor and reality, understanding the gestures of help she received were acts of humanity, not scandal. The community's judgment often blurred lines, but the anchors of truth held steady in the small acts of daily life. The child's laughter, the drying boards, the closed shack doors at sunset. Tieu Nu's journey was a testament to the resilience of those who face hardship alone, relying on small kindnesses and unspoken alliances to carry them through. In this quiet part of the world, the story continued, a mix of hope and challenge, a narrative woven with threads of courage amidst misunderstanding. Tieu Nu's path was not just her own, but a mirror to many who struggled in the shadows, seeking light and shelter in uncertain times. The detailed tapestry of Tieu Nu's days revealed more than just survival. It illuminated the human spirit. The work she did, the people she met, the love she guarded, all painted a vivid picture of endurance and the small victories that shaped her world. Tieu Nu's story, though filled with hardship, was not without moments of grace. The small village with its wooden sheds, peeling workshops, and watchful neighbors formed the backdrop to a tale that unfolded slowly but deeply. Every plank dried, every door secured was a chapter in her ongoing struggle for stability. As the sun dipped and the village settled into nightfall, the shed stood closed and guarded. Beyond its wooden walls, rumors might swirl, but inside there was a fragile peace. Tieu Nu and her baby, in their quiet corner, prepared for whatever the next day might bring. Tieu Nu's life unfolded within the intricate tapestry of a Vietnamese rural village, a place where tradition and modern pressures coexisted with tension and resilience. Her daily reality was a microcosm reflecting broader social realities typical in such rural settings, where community ties are strong but judgment is swift, and where economic hardship and social survival intertwine in complex ways. Within the village, social structures were layered and multifaceted, mirroring findings in sociological studies of Vietnamese rural communities. The social fabric included multiple classes and strata, ranging from landowners and the economically better off to laborers and those living at or below subsistence levels. Tieu Nu, a single mother bearing the heavy responsibility of care and provision, inhabited a space marked by vulnerability and resilience. She was part of the working class, engaged in physically demanding labor like drying wood boards, a task both symbolic and practical, in demonstrating her effort to claim agency and sustain her family. Economic survival in such settings often demanded the balancing of multiple roles. For Tieu Nu, this meant managing the fierce demands of motherhood alongside the necessity of labor. The village's economy was largely informal and based on traditional activities, including agriculture, craft work, and small-scale trades. Labor opportunities were often precarious and dependent on social networks and goodwill. When Tieu Nu reached out to Comrade Hugh, she tapped into this network of reciprocal help and communal obligation, highlighting how rural Vietnamese society relied heavily on interpersonal relationships for survival. Yet this reliance came with complex social scrutiny. The community's gaze was both protective and policing. Villagers closely watched one another's actions, not only to offer mutual support, but also to enforce social norms and hierarchies. For a woman like Tieu Nu, especially one outside a traditional nuclear family structure, this scrutiny was intense. The presence of a small child in a makeshift shelter stirred whispers and rumors, exposing her to suspicion and social judgment. Such suspicion was rooted partly in the cultural expectations of women's behavior and family roles. Vietnamese rural society, like many traditional societies, placed high value on family status, honor, and social conformity. deviations from expected norms, a woman living alone with a child, taking shelter in non-permanent housing, or depending on communal charity, could trigger gossip and even ostracism. Tucum's act of closing her small shed's doors was emblematic, a physical barrier not only against the elements, but metaphorically against the prying eyes and whispered accusations of neighbors. The tension escalated when rumors framed Tucum's presence as scandalous, suggesting improper relationships between her and local men, accusations often leveled at women in vulnerable positions. Such allegations reflected gendered dimension of rural social control, where women disproportionately bear the brunt of social censure regarding morality and family integrity. The harsh verbal confrontations she faced were a stark demonstration of how social stigma could manifest, intertwining personal survival with public reputation. Despite these pressures, Tucum's inner strength and dignity shone through. Her responses, imbued with quiet resolve, highlighted the dissonance between lived reality and community suspicion. She was a woman working hard to protect and nurture her child, navigating the harsh judgments of a community that struggled to see beyond appearances. Her daily routine, drying boards, caring for her child, securing her shelter, formed acts of defiance against marginalization. Analyzing the broader social context, recent sociological research reveals that rural Vietnamese communities are experiencing rapid structural changes. Traditional social hierarchies and economic bases are shifting due to modernization, urban migration, and changing cultural attitudes. Yet many villages retain strong communal bonds and conservative social norms, especially regarding gender roles and family structures. In this liminal space, women like Tucum exist at the crossroads of tradition and change, their realities shaped by both enduring social expectations and evolving economic challenges. The role of kinship and neighborly help remains pivotal. Comrade Hugh's involvement illustrates the vital importance of social networks in rural survival. His assistance, both practical and protective, reveals the dual nature of these relationships, sources of support, but also potential sites of tension when misunderstandings arise. The community's responses to Tucum oscillated between compassion and suspicion, aid and accusation, underscoring the fragile balance in social cohesion. Tucum's story is also one of spatial negotiation. The sheds, outdoor workspaces, and temporary shelters commonly used in rural areas symbolize transitional spaces, liminal zones between public and private life, visibility and concealment, independence and dependence. By securing her shed with heavy wooden cores, Tucum not only created physical boundaries, but also asserted a claim to dignity and safety within a socially precarious environment. The labor itself, drying wood boards, although humble, holds deeper meaning. It represents both economic necessity and a ritualized form of stability. The repetitive work under the sun, the counting of rows dried, and the occasional wages earned contribute to a narrative of persistence amid hardship. The child's presence adds a poignant layer, a living symbol of hope, continuity, and the stakes of survival. This saga also reflects the gendered labor division typical in rural Vietnam, where women often juggle child-rearing, household management, and income-generating activities without institutional support. The village's semi-formal economy leaves little room for secured work, magnifying vulnerability for single mothers like Tucum. Her initiative in seeking work and organizing childcare simultaneously reveals resourcefulness that contrasts sharply with the creeping social stigmatization. The interactions with neighbors and landlords reveal the embeddedness of social capital and the delicate negotiations required for access to resources. Gaining permission to use wooden cores symbolizes more than obtaining materials. It exemplifies the necessity of social acceptance, even conditional, to survive in a tightly woven community. Furthermore, the story captures the emotional weight carried by social isolation. While Tucum receives help, misunderstandings breed loneliness and anxiety. The communal nature of village life can feel like a double-edged sword, offering both lifelines and exposure. Tucum's presence in a space traditionally governed by established family units challenges social norms, provoking fears and conflict emblematic of broader rural societal struggles. The community's response illustrates how rumors and fear of social disruption can escalate tensions. The accusing voices reflect underlying insecurities about family honor and social order in the face of modern challenges like economic strain and shifting family structures. Such conflicts are not just personal dramas, but also mirror larger societal transformations underway in rural Vietnam. Behind the scenes, figures like Comrade Hugh play mediating roles, embodying the complex function of social intermediaries who balance loyalty, social norms, and compassion. His efforts to clarify misunderstandings and defend Tucum reflect a progressive thread within traditional structures, highlighting potential pathways toward greater social inclusion and empathy. Ultimately, Tucum's story is a vivid portrayal of a woman's survival within the intersection of economic hardship, social tradition, and personal dignity. It documents not only her daily struggles, but also the broader rural Vietnamese social environment marked by structural change, social judgment, communal interdependence, and the search for hope amidst adversity. Her experience echoes the narratives of many rural women navigating a world where economic necessity and social expectation collide. The story is a poignant reminder that social support systems, while essential, must transcend suspicion and stigma to truly empower those in vulnerable positions. Tucum's fight to maintain her shelter, care for her child, and claim her place within the village's complex social web offers profound insights into resilience and the transformative potential of community understanding. It encourages reflection on how rural social dynamics shape individual lives and how empathy and clear communication might ease tensions rooted in misunderstanding and fear. Her journey continues, emblematic of larger social currents pushing rural Vietnam toward new realities, where tradition meets modernity and where the strength of individuals like Tucum shape the future of community life. Tucum's story reached a revealing crossroads as the rhythms of rural life in Vietnam continued to evolve against a backdrop of profound socioeconomic transformations. Her experience, though deeply personal, serves as a powerful illustration of the wider transitions currently shaping modern Vietnamese rural society. These changes are multifaceted and intricate, encompassing shifts in agricultural practices, social structures, cultural norms, and the very definition of community. Modern Nông thôn Canh Sai is no longer solely a bastion of traditional agriculture and age-old practices, but rather a dynamic arena embracing new technologies, diversified livelihoods, and evolving social relations. The country's strategic push towards Nông thôn mới, or new rural development, encapsulates the aspiration to create rural spaces that combine economic vitality, improved living standards, and cultural preservation. This vision is both progressive and rooted in the respect for the heritage of village life. Tucum's efforts to sustain her family through hard labor reflect the enduring economic realities of many rural households. Despite advances in mechanization and infrastructure, a large segment of the population continues to depend on manual work and informal employment. Her role as a single mother underscores the demographic and social complexities emerging in the countryside, where traditional family models are being challenged by migration, labor shifts, and changing social expectations. The rural social fabric, deeply influenced by Confucian and community values, has historically emphasized familial cohesion, social hierarchy, and reciprocity. In recent decades, these values have encountered the pressures of modernization, leading to recalibrated notions of social support and individual agency. Tucum's reliance on local allies like Comrade Hugh demonstrates how traditional social networks remain vital. These connections provide not only material assistance, but also psychological and social affirmation, which are crucial amid communal scrutiny. Modernization has also intensified the visibility of women's changing roles. women in rural Vietnam increasingly participate in economic activities beyond subsistence farming, often juggling responsibilities as income earners, caregivers, and community members. The community's initial suspicion and misunderstanding toward Tieu Nu illustrates the tension between evolving realities and entrenched social norms. The gossip and accusations about her relationship status and presence in the community highlight the gendered dimensions of morality policing in rural areas. This dynamic is a social mechanism aimed at preserving traditional family structures, but can marginalize those who deviate from expected roles, such as single mothers or women living independently. Nonetheless, the gradual acceptance and defense she receives from certain community members indicate a subtle but noteworthy shift. This shift suggests that amidst the persistence of traditional values, there is growing recognition of diverse social realities and the need for empathy. Comrade Hugh's purport represents a bridge between old and new attitudes, promoting inclusivity and understanding within the rural social milieu. Spatially, Tieu Nu's secured shelter symbolizes more than physical protection. It is a metaphor for her quest for social legitimacy and personal dignity. The rural environment, frequently characterized by open spaces and communal living, leaves little room for privacy or independent existence. Her ability to carve out a defined space for herself and her child challenges conventional spatial and social boundaries, asserting her right to exist and work under her terms. The everyday act of drying wood boards becomes a ritualized assertion of productivity and self-reliance within this context. It is through these laborious yet humble actions that Tieu Nu combats invisibility and stigma. Her perseverance transforms routine work into acts of resistance against marginalization, showcasing the reciprocal relationship between labor and identity in rural settings. Demographic transitions and economic diversification in rural Vietnam also affect family dynamics and gender relations. Increased migration to urban centers, growth of non-agricultural employment, and expanded communication technologies bring new influences and opportunities, but also social disruption. Women who remain in villages like Tieu Nu navigate these altered landscapes where traditional expectations often clash with the realities of survival. Educational improvements and policy initiatives aimed at rural development seek to ameliorate some hardships faced by families like Tieu Nu's. Programs promoting women's empowerment, child welfare, and social security are gradually knitting a broader safety net. However, implementation gaps and persistent cultural norms limit their reach, underscoring the complex interface between policy and lived experience. Tieu Nu's journey is thus situated at the intersection of personal struggle and societal transformation. Her story tells of resilience amid hardship, yet also points to the critical need for societal evolution. Vietnamese rural society stands at a pivotal juncture, balancing between preserving cherished traditions and embracing modern values that acknowledge individual dignity and diversity. Her experience highlights the centrality of social recognition in fostering well-being. Beyond economic assistance, acceptance and understanding from one's community form the bedrock of social stability and mental health. False accusations and stigmatization undermine these foundations, increasing social exclusion and emotional distress. The transition to a modern rural Vietnam envisions communities that are economically vibrant, socially inclusive, and culturally rich. This vision is reflected in efforts to improve infrastructure, education, healthcare, and environmental sustainability, all of which contribute to a better quality of life. It also requires challenging outdated prejudices and expanding the social imagination to accommodate evolving family forms and individual choices. Tieu Nu's story can be seen as both a symptom and a site of these transformations. Her struggle embodies the enduring challenges of poverty and social stigma, while her resilience and the support she garners point toward emerging possibilities for change. The narrative urges a rethinking of rural social policies and community attitudes to ensure that people like Tieu Nu are not left to face their battles alone. The complex dance between tradition and modernization playing out in Vietnamese rural areas demands nuanced understanding and concerted effort. Individuals like Tieu Nu, navigating the fault lines of social expectation and economic survival, illustrate the urgent need to foster inclusive communities that honor both heritage and human dignity. Her life unfolding in the shadow and light of social change offers profound lessons on the power of empathy, the necessity of social safety nets, and the resilience of the human spirit. It calls for a concerted commitment to building rural societies where women and families can thrive without fear of misunderstanding or exclusion. Tieu Nu's story closes not simply as an isolated account, but as a vital chapter in the ongoing narrative of Vietnam's rural renewal. It embodies the hopes, struggles, and transformations of countless lives across the countryside, marking a poignant testament to the enduring quest for dignity and the enduring spirit that carries this quest forward into the future.